All right, everybody, welcome to another video. This time it's a duo starter guide. I know a lot of people have been asking for more team-based content, so I went and found the best team games player in the land, and that's Soimon. Soimon, you want to introduce yourself to everybody?
That's cute. I appreciate that. That's actually slander. I'm not, but I'll do my best.
Well, I mean, you're one of them. You're extremely knowledgeable. At least you have all of the lore. There's so many times we're playing duos and you'd be like, this guy, oh, this guy, he's known for this. He's done this for years.
Look, I played with the best, and I've been beaten thoroughly by the best. So.
It's actually interesting.
It's adjacent.
It's actually interesting how there's like, as someone who's played mostly ones, I've recently started playing more team games, that there are like people known, and not just like teams, but like this duo plays a lot. Everyone knows this duo. If you play duos, you know them at a higher level, at least. Same like in fours. These fours are always playing at this time, and like, watch out, they'll do this. I don't know. It's fun when like almost like a cultural lore builds up in a game in a very specific area where people only play this part know it. So I don't know. That's been fun to learn too.
For sure. It's actually been a little bit of a hit in taking ranked opponents and into the names getting hidden, because it used to be quite exciting to run into one of the best teams. If you're queuing, especially in twos. And a little bit of counter picking going on, but no more.
For sure. Well, and now everyone can actually keep the replays open, which is actually better for us in the end. Before, we ever need to hide the replays, so you can't find it, unless of course you know them. But anyway, so today we want to talk about some basics of playing duos. If either you have been playing duos or you want to start playing duos, maybe you're a 4-team gamer, maybe a 1v1, you want to start playing duos. I wanted this to be a specific duo starter guide, because I feel like the strategy for duos is different from 1v1, which is kind of different from 3s and 4s. Would you say, would you agree or disagree with that, Soimon?
Yeah, no, twos is its own game.
And that's why I think it's a lot of fun, because when I played fours almost seem chaotic. Twos feels very like there's a lot, I feel like, of strategy and tactics involved in twos.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, fours has too much going on for one person. You focus on your part of the war, and if the other side collapses and you lose the game, that's like, maybe you had nothing to do with that. But twos is
it's plenty of times I'm playing fours and like you're like, I'm winning, and then you turn in into two people and your team are just wiped. And it's like, oh, that sucks. But
and I would say threes are closer to fours, but sometimes it's a little bit more focused, but often threes is just like a mini fours.
All right, let's get into it. So first, why is duos fun? So I have these ideas on here. We can kind of go through them, but I think the first and foremost is, in ones, you're going to play one civ, and the thought process is, how does civ play against this civ? And in duos, there's this whole strategy complexity around which two civs to pick together, especially considering you're playing against another duo and their pick civs, and so those synergies, I think, are fascinating, strategic, and like, if you're learning the game, something that adds another complexity layer and interest to it. And it's though I do feel kind of boxed in by it at times. What are your thoughts, Soimon?
Yeah, I mean, it is very basic when you say synergies. It's like, well, I pick a knight civ and you pick an archer civ, and we go and feudal all in with knights and archers. And while I think that's a really good part of the game, that does also get a little bit tired. And especially with all the expansions we've had recently, there's a lot more going on these days, and that kind of thing doesn't necessarily dominate twos like it used to, which is probably a good thing. But yeah, like composition, synergies and composition, synergies and timing. Like, you pick a Dark Age aggro civ, I'll pick a feudal aggro civ, and there's this really nice little sequential. You were attacking him in Dark Age, I pick up where you pick whatever the opposite is sort of picking up is. What's the opposite?
What you're putting down.
Where you're putting, when you start to slack off and you have to, age up and stop producing, my knights turn up, right? So there's different kinds of synergies, and yeah, like you said, you're also worried about what the opponent's doing. You don't want to get caught out with unique units and little gaps in the counter system that you're not ready for. Like, if you go knights and archers, there's heavy spears now, right? Like, there's all kinds of different things going on that I think make for like a really large number of cool pairs of civs. We have a lot of healing in feudal, mobile healing in feudal, that makes certain civs combos really good. But yeah,
I think even like the abilities of civs, like Deli and Knight Templar both wanting to do sacred sites, then they have them controlling the sacred sites. You just can't ignore that as the opponent.
Yep.
Knights Templar knowing where all the relics are immediately. So Atria can fast castle. If you don't scout perfectly, it's fine. Like, you know where all the relics are. So just things like that. Also, like, it's not even just the unit pairings. It's also like the Civ strengths and weaknesses in their pairings. That's really interesting.
Yep. And we'll touch on that later when we talk about sharing out responsibilities, because of course, part of that synergy can be, I have the knights out in the field, you fast castle. In ones, you can't just schnaffle up all the relics, right? You have to defend and fight for them. But in twos, that could be your teammate's job. You get the knights up, I'll get the relics.
Exactly. And also, I think, so you brought this up when we were prepping the slides, and you said, so I was thinking this, as playing it, the amount of times I messed up because I was thinking about a 1v1 context, and you had to keep reminding me it's a different game. That's not how you think about it. You need to do this. You also mentioned that you feel like it is a simpler game in a way. And I'm gonna kind of step back and let you take the floor on this, because I didn't even think about it like that until you brought it up.
Yeah, I think that this kind of like your bottom point here. It's not all on you. I think being responsible for everything makes ones really mentally taxing, and I know a lot of people would agree with that one. That the the mental load of playing ones to the best of your ability can be quite a lot. And I'm always impressed with streamers who can go 4+ hours playing ones back to back, because I need a nap after a game or two. But in twos, you've actually you've really narrowed down what your role in this game is. If I'm the knight player and I'm making only knights, it's my teammate's job to flex their composition to make it work with whatever we get encountered with, right? If I'm not in charge of picking up relics, then I'm not even gonna think about relics, right? If I'm Mongol, my teammate's gonna walk for me. So it's kind of like you're relieving yourself of responsibilities. And of course the game's a lot more aggressive, so it gets shorter and sharper. You don't have to kind of think so much about long games. That's in my experience anyway.
It's interesting because as someone who's played a lot of ones, it actually felt more difficult to me when I first started playing duos a lot with you.
Is that because I was yelling at you?
Yelling at me was part of it. That hurt my self-esteem, and it made me feel less about myself. But no, it was more of, I used to, everything was filtered through what am I doing versus what is my opponent doing. And so many times the mistakes I would make would be like, well, if I go archers but my opponent's going horsemen, I can't do it. I need to go spears. And you'd be like, but man, I'm doing knights, so why are you making spears? And because I didn't even look at you, I didn't like the thing that feels more difficult to me is I now have to also consider you and what you're doing. I have to consider your side of the map. If something's happening at your base, I need to take a peek, though part of that is also, we'll talk about the communication portion of it. I have to consider what the person on your side of the map is, if it's a map where we're more split, and how, like, I can't just make my decisions in a vacuum. I have to consider yours. And while that does simplify the decision tree, it also widens it to having to include more variables. So it's like a simplified tree, but it's a wider tree.
That's a really good point. And I did not think about it from your perspective. So I'm sorry for that. A lot of the stuff
time you ever apologized to me.
just doing it for the microphone. So the reason why I bring that up is because a lot of the stuff we're going to talk about is rules that like collapse all those possibilities down. So like strict rules you follow, pre-decided stuff. You're not discussing this in game, where we don't have to communicate, and you don't have to think, oh, I'll deal with this, because it's already your friend's job, right? And of course that does mean that the game is more difficult when you don't have those rules in place. But when you expect, so like, let's say there's two Mongols, right? And I'm French, you're Mongol,
a nightmare,
and there's a Mongolian opponent, right? I'm not going to say this. I expect you to fight him in Dark Age because you're the Dark Age guy, right? If you chill in Dark Age and their Mongol comes over and tells my gold, I'm going to be a little bit mad, and then I'm going to realize that I needed to say something. But like, but really, like, that's your job. And it's also not something that needs to be planned. You should see that Mongol and think, okay, cool. I'm gonna have to at least take this guy on if he attacks me. I might even attack if he doesn't, right? But I'm definitely not gonna let my friend get outdone in Dark Age. I'm not gonna expect my French friend to make spears in Dark Age.
I was looking to say, why didn't you make spears? Did you not scout him?
Right, because it's like, if your opponent is a knight civ, you should expect them to make knights. You shouldn't say you're going to make knights, right? There's like, if you, yeah. So see what I'm getting? Yeah,
it's like that joke we always do when we're scouting, and the French player goes school of cavalry. Like, whoa, French player's doing school of cavalry.
Exactly. So excited. It's not like spotting an aber wing out, right? All right, or a council hall, an English council hall. Yeah, so I think like the simplicity comes afterwards. So first of all, you learn all these like implicit rules of what can I expect from my teammate, what should I have to ask for, and what should I just expect them to do, and you stop saying that. You stop thinking about those problems. You stop thinking about, oh no, my French opponent is going to bring knights. I have a French teammate. They're going to go knights tonight. They're going to fully occupy each other's attention, right? So yeah, I guess that's when the simplicity comes. It's after you've learned the rules of.
That's a good point. I needed to learn the rules. I'm still learning the rules. And also, as we talked about when setting these sites, there's also the exceptions to the rules, though we won't delve into those as much today. We want more of just the basics and how to get started on playing duos well. So we're actually kind of dipping into the next slide. So let's just go on and move on to the next slide. So how is 2v2 different from 1v1? I do this more from 1v1 prospect, though. I think some of these also apply to if you're going from larger team games to scaling down to 2v2. So we have your base is split into 2 locations. Turtling is weak, rush is thus strong, and the nuance is the way aggression is used. So I think the first one is the one that really split me through a loop first. Your base being split and also being split differently depending on the map completely changes the complexity of the game. And you wrote this one. Considering our 2 bases as one base that is split into is also interesting, considering that now if you lose all your landmarks, you're not actually dead. So it is like one base split in 2.
Yeah, and I say you have one base. It's because I can't win and you lose, or you win and I lose, right? Like we both win together, we both lose together. There's no divvying that up. So you have to think of losing one half of your base as a loss condition, right? Like potentially anyway. I know there's always chances to rebuild. Maybe you're taking out one of the opponent's bases at the same time, but you have to think about that in terms of your defensive stuff. And this is what the second point is, that turtling is weak, right? I'm not saying like don't tower your gold. I mean, don't like fast imp cannon tower HRE Arkan farm like.
Well, first Simon, can you define turtling so we're not assuming people know what that means in the context?
I mean, okay, so this is the triangle of strategy counters, which is turtle, boom, and rush, right? Turtle is very inward looking. You maybe pro scouting meet back home, probably building farms. You're putting towers and defensive structures. Static defense is a key. Walls, towers are very commonly used by defensive civs in 1v1s. So barbecue, English TCs, White Tower, Kremlin, etc. Like a few seasons ago, every Riz player was going Kremlin 2TC, right? Because the Kremlin guaranteed that you could get that second TC up. What happens in 2s, of course, is that you see, okay, this English player doesn't intend to leave their base. Cool. We'll go and roll his neighbor, right? So outside of Gorge, this is my rule of thumb of see somebody being too turtly, we're going to feudal all in the other player.
Yeah, go attack the other person. They're not getting any help.
Yeah. Now, two turtles, I think it sounds like maybe it would work, but I feel like it's even worse. I don't really want to justify that, but
it's the same concept that if you are allowing the opposing team to work together to attack one person, you're going to lose. Like turtling works because it's hard for one person to attack someone who's being super defensive. If they're investing in a pure rush, and rush being like you're putting all your resources into units and you're just pushing, because in this game inherently, defense is stronger than offense. Your TC can defend really well. You have towers. Defensive, like mass archers and spears and inside a base is hard to beat. So like, if you're both turtling, which means you're not able to help each other very easily, then it just immediately means if a player is just scouting at all, lets us two attack the person, now their advantage is gone.
Yeah, fair enough.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that makes Rush strong, but of course, if Rush is strong, then any game theorists in chat would suggest that of course we're both going to rush, and then it's not really a rush anymore. It's just two people playing feudal aggression, and two big armies meeting in the middle of the map. Yep. Which takes me back to the last slide. I love duos because everybody makes a lot of units and has a big fight in the middle of the map. Mm-hmm. Happens really early in the game. You don't have to wait for 16 minutes post-Imperial, huge slug out in the middle of the map. Like, it often picks up really quickly.
Mm-hmm. And I agree, because I feel like early on in twos, I would try to do things like naked fast castle, or like two TC into something else, and we would die so often because like good like any relatively good twos team, if they're communicating, will go, this guy's fast castling, we just need to either pick to attack him or attack his teammate, and it'll go bad for him. And what it feels like to me, at least, is in twos, you almost are always making units at some capacity. Even if you want to go castle fairly quickly, there needs to be some sort of token resistance, unless there is a base setup or a way the map is set up that allows you to castle, or you have a civ that castles really fast. But even then, it's like, if a team's well coordinated, they can do a lot of damage before you're getting enough units out to do anything.
Yeah, I think the classic counterexample of that is HRE Burgrave on Gorge. Gorge, of course, being the shared base map. HRE having a fast castle, and the proximity of your base to the enemy makes infantry quite strong. There's no like lateral play in that map, so yeah, you feel free to Burgrave on that map. You can walk straight at them. If they have knights, you're gonna heavy mace them. You were allowed to. You were made able to. You were allowed to fast castle by your teammate, getting some feudal army out there. So, yeah, as a counter example. But again, like, fast castle still fits into this aggression. Not a double fast castle. I'd say almost never do that.
No.
But, anyway, there's a point about that on an upcoming slide. So,
but the last thing I add, the nuance in the aggression, there is so much more posturing in twos. Like, there's posture in ones, but you know where your opponent is. You can kind of guess who the armies are, and we'll get into more as we break down more specifics. But like, the feeling of constant, like, I feel like there's so many times where we're both making units. It's like, okay, this person's there with these units. Let's rotate it. Let's like shade this area a little bit more. This person's okay. Maybe we can kind of push their base a little bit. There's so, like, it's not just pure. We're just attacking their base. There's so much like back and forth little skirmishes that are happening, trying to find that opening.
It's so important to know where they are. You are moving left and right, and there is, like you say, a lot of posturing. I hover my knight mass outside someone's base, and that might fix, part of their army in that base, which might be all we need to do something elsewhere, right?
Mm-hmm.
But, a lot of movement and a lot of posturing until there's a big fight. Until somebody finds the opportunity for a really good 2v1, or people are driven into like a last resort. We're just going to go for it, I guess, because the game's only going to get worse from here for us.
Exactly. Next slide. The 2v2 mindset. So as you brought up earlier, the kind of the implicit rules of the way you need to think about 2v2s to be successful. So we have the biggest one, which is I think the first thing I had to learn when playing with you, that I got yelled at the most, which is roles need to be divided for efficiency and then followed. So some of the roles that you often see are who, like relics, sacred sites, who's getting what upgrades, because you don't want to put all your resources in the same things. You want to split who's doing what, and especially it being units. And so the more that this is pre-decided and you're just flowing off that decision tree, and it hasn't be like, I'm just going to make like archers. It's I'm the ranged person. As much as possible, I need to adjust what range unit that needs to be, or I'm the cav person and what roles that means for me.
And that plays back to that point we had earlier about things being easier in twos, because now you are just solving part of that problem, right? You're just the guy who switches from archers to crossbows when your opponents go heavy. Because that's your role. You're the guy with all the archery ranges, right? Your teammate has all the stables, and your opponents are now 100% crossbows because crossbows are broken, and so they switch to horsemen.
This even goes down to like civ bonuses. Like when you play Zushi, or French, you're like, I'm gonna pro scout. I'll send you some deer. Don't worry about doing that. Don't worry about like, don't waste your time with that.
Do not double pro scout.
Yeah,
it's like 400 resources now. Yeah, you can see your opponent's mill or TC as a drop off point, and you can do the pro scouting for them.
Mm-hmm. Or even things like if I play IU bid, and you're playing French or like that, let me have the berries. I'm not gonna touch deer. Let me feast on berries. I'm gonna eat the berries. You do the deer, and that way we can both use the food source that's best for us. So we're maximizing in our role. And so to me, it's not just like the unit you're making. It's also what resources you're taking, where you are on the map. I think this even goes to like who's gonna make the siege, who's gonna make the defenses, because some civs have really good defenses, some civs don't. So as much as possible, based on your civs and the strengths and weaknesses, decide the role you're playing so that your decision tree is smaller. Is there anything else you'd add on that?
Well, some of that's on the fly, because if your teammate picks French, they're going to be making knights right at the start of the game, so you don't need to talk about that. But then, if you have an HRE teammate, it might matter whether they go Regnitz or Burgrave. And if you see the Regnitz, for example, like don't make a monastery. Like that's already resolved, right? So
yeah. True. And also like how you help them out. Like there are so many, like I've been playing HRE with you a lot, and there's so many times where I send my I'll send like a bunch of prelates out, and some get sniped, and you get mad at me because you're like, I'm the knight guy, I'm on the map. You're supposed to tell me. Yeah. You're supposed to tell me you're going for this relic. I'll guard you. And in my mind, I'm just like, no. The way you play it is, you take some risks. You lose a prelate, use a prelate. You're like, you don't need to lose one. I'm on the map with feudal French knights that can take some hits.
And also, it's my job, right? Yeah. Like my job is to safeguard those guys back home. You can also have more like strategic jobs split up. So if you are doing early aggression, you're going to be strong from like the 4-minute mark onwards. If your teammate is going 3TC and booming, they might be the carry, right? You harass, you delay, your opponent's going to carry. That means you drop off, right? So you could have quite a weak period in this game. Your opponent's fully boomed, post-imperial, spamming fire arrow elite camel archers, and you're like on 70 villages, one TC, you've only just made it a castle, and like that's the kind of thing
that's exactly happened, right? I played a duos with, I think it was Makomi once, where I fast castle, but they all ended me, and I basically was just getting my teeth kicked in, and Makomi's like, if you can just hold, I'm booming. He was like Malians or something. He's like, I'm booming really hard right now, I'll come help, just hold. Yep. And I basically almost died. I mean, like I lost a lot of shit, but then he showed up with basically just waves of Malians, and we won that game because he was able to boom to the point that he could 2v1. So it's all about the communication and understanding what you're building towards, and yeah, like a person can feudal aggress 2 people if your teammate's booming, but your teammate's got to be efficient, and you got to know, and in the way you're being aggressive is then not throwing your units away, but like just poking and trying to make it last as long as possible.
You have to let go of some of your solo mindset around fear traits. So if you're used to say, you know what, I'm happy to get 2 vills and lose this night, that might no longer be a good move, right? Like your knights might become very precious. You might be playing against, multi-TC opponents who can afford to lose those villages, right?
Exactly. Next, how the map affects the game. This is something that we talked about, where the ultimate goal of twos, right, is that you are working together, that you each make a part of a comp, and you're fighting together. I think the greatest example of this is Aligned Horizon, one of the new maps. You literally spawn next to each other. You can very easily push the opponent together, and so it makes sense to really build a comp. Your bases are literally next to each other. But then other maps like I forget the name of this one, but it's Volcanic Island. You guys, you don't spawn. You spawn technically next to each other, but the opponents are so close that's basically 2 1v1s at the same time. And
I've had too many games in Volcanic Island and 2s on comms just silence the whole game because 2 people just play 2 1v1s. I honestly just like, unless you really enjoy that like hybrid play style, maybe just ban it. Like there have been a few maps like that over the seasons where
hideouts like
they're just not really. they're just two 1v1s.
Mm-hmm.
And if you want it, and if you're enjoying, teamwork, etc., then maybe just ban them.
Yeah, it's basically if going to help your teammate puts your base in such danger that you could easily be raided, it's a map where some of those rules about 2v2s kind of go out the window. Like, you can't just play one unit. You might need to make a normal unit comp like you would for 1v1, because you can't rely on your teammate, especially if your teammate is an infantry, is making infantry. You can't rely on them to come help you.
Hideout was the same. I actually think it actually makes 3v3s quite a fun format.
Yes, those maps are best for 3v3s, because then, like, which person is the third helping, and that's the complexity of that. Yeah. But just consider that. I think where the rules for 2s change the most is on maps where you're playing 1v1s more than you're actually playing a 2v2. That's just why I wanted to have this slide in there. Any other thoughts?
Yeah, look, I mean, we're kind of talking in defaults. We're talking about open maps where you can either link up with your teammate or, push out on your own side, like Dry Arabia, right?
Mm-hmm. Prairie is another one in the map pool right now, where that's
there is something I wanted to say, though. This is like this classic play in 2v2s, which is map specific, and it doesn't apply, for example, on Horizons or Volcanic Island, which is what I usually call the wedge. If you can drive your 2-unit comp in between your opponent's bases, where they are making their own 2-unit comp, you can basically win the game from the point that, say, you're sitting in between them and you have knights and archers, and one of your opponents is making spears and one of your opponents is making horses, right? So horses and spears would maybe beat you in fair fight, but because the spears are coming from one side where you've positioned your archers, and the horses are coming from the other where you position your knights, like, they're stuck, right? Yep. So that's, in my opinion, like the classic 2s play, where you do this feudal aggression, you try and drive that wedge between your opponents, and then you can face outwards.
Mm-hmm.
And deny their ability to rejoin. That
brings us. Not yet. We'll get to that later. So let's take that into common 2v2 strategies. I feel like they fall into basically 2 broad strategies. Now, don't get me wrong. Like, you could just like in 1v1s, you can technically do anything if you execute it well. But we're talking about default strategies. If I feel like there's the all-in rush where you're both just making units and you're pushing, and the goal is one of you is going to make rams and you're going to try to push one of them, and then the other one is one person is delaying, usually the knight civ. They're the ones who are trying to raid, keep their opponents in their base back up, while the other person is doing some sort of boom, some sort of way to gain an eco advantage to then come take over the game later on.
Yeah, and I like this division. This is good.
Mm-hmm. The thing I wanted to point out is in the rush, I think this is a thing we can expound upon. It's important to attack the easier person. I define easier as weaker defensively. Maybe the civ just doesn't have a lot of good options. Maybe you caught them making a unit that you can easily counter as 2s. Or the eco is especially exposed meaning like all the resources are forward, it's hard for them to defend. Is there anything that makes you think, like, when you're trying to decide, okay, we scouted both civs, to you, which one do you define as easier to attack?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think there are 2 aspects to this. One is, like you say, the turtliness of that civ. I don't want to be all-inning a Roos who has pro-scouted some meat and has wooden fortresses on their wood line, right? Like, what do you get? There's nothing to take out. I do want to attack a Malian with pit mines, right? Like, that's easy. Or, not that I've seen Ottoman in the last 3 years, but like an Ottoman, this production is extending outside their TC range, right? You're like, cool, that's a goal, we can take that out. So that's one aspect of it, the easier civ. That really could be either of them until one of them is something like English or Lancaster or Roos. Mm-hmm. Even then, it can be those civs, right? But the other aspect that I think is really important is if you have a cavalry player and an infantry player, your infantry player is possibly making archers and walking those archers across the map. There are 2 directions that archer player could go. One is to their close opponent, one is to their diagonal opponent.
Yeah.
All-inning the opponent that is the diagonal for your infantry player is really dangerous, because your opponent who is not getting all-in can make cavalry and pick off those reinforcements. If you're getting your supply lines picked off while you're trying to all-in, that's the delay that the other player needs.
Not only that, if they're going diagonal, their base is even more exposed, because then the opponent closest to them could snipe, or they could just be sending cav into their wood line or to the gold, or if they're on food, exposed food. And if they're making archers, it's not even that they can rally archers into their base. Like, they're already they're just gonna die to horsemen. So it's generally, if possible, you want to attack the person closest to the person with the infantry. I think that is a good point.
And so if you don't have a target who meets up both those requirements, maybe just don't do that. Maybe this isn't the game to do the all-in, right? Yeah. Maybe find another approach, because you know, you should be excited about the all-in opportunity and not forcing the all-in every game, because that's the strategy that you know.
Yep. And then the delayed in eco, this is usually when you're paired with a civ that has especially good castle pop. So like Japan, HRE, IU bid, or if they have a civ that has really good 2TC eco, like Avicid, China, things like that. And so we kind of mentioned this earlier, but the idea of whoever is the delay civ, which generally should probably be a good cav civ, that could be knights, that could be Ghazis with Delhi or something like that, but something where they can delay and buy time so that boom player is not getting harassed and is able to hit that point where they're like, basically as you are starting to weaken, they're showing up to take pass the torch.
And if you're the player who's doing the boom or tech, and especially if you know you're a lower level player, get your stuff really tight, right? Like really nail your build order. Don't fast castle a couple of minutes later than the build guide you're following does. Like really sort that out, because the timing that your teammate is petering at, and you're supposed to come in there, pick up the slack before they drop off. And if the 30 seconds or the extra minute that you take because you gathered some wood, or you wanted 2 towers, or you wanted to get arrow slits on your towers. Like and actually part of that is trust, right? Like if your opponent is doing the delaying, just trust them. Do your naked build. If that was your plan, do your naked build. And then, if you lose, well, was your teammate out of position? Did they let you down, or was it too greedy, right?
Yeah.
Figure that out. Don't half-ass it. Do all this defensive stuff that makes your build too slow, and therefore your opponent your teammate falls over before you've hit your power stroke, right? You actually give it a proper college try.
Actually the over defensiveness is a one's mindset. This idea that there's no one in here to help me, so I gotta get my tower up, I gotta get the arrow slits up, I gotta maybe gather a little bit extra wood. Like, no, if this tech or this boom is the thing that's gonna win you the game, you gotta trust your ally to buy you the time. Whether that's them defending your gold if they show up faster than you expected, whether that's them raiding and buying you time. Yeah, I agree. And you're also right in the sense that, like, let's say you're the HRE player, you're gonna fast cast, you're gonna get relics, that's gonna be your eco pop. Well, what if you're playing against another HRE player? Like, then the battle becomes two-poled, where you're probably both fast casting. So who's the better fast castler? And two, probably both of your teammates are trying to delay. So who can delay better? And to pick up your end of the slack, you gotta have a build order that's tight to accomplish the goal you want, which is, like, even in my other videos, a plan is one of the most important things. Make sure you go into the game with that in mind.
Exactly. And don't forget that if you're trying to find a little bit of extra time, like, there's teamwork, there's sharing resources, there's doubling down on a deer push to get the deer into someone's arc and for the Burgrave, there's that kind of thing. Like, you can do stuff together. You can do stuff together, and you can make things faster, right? Are you sharing a tower? Like, there's so much map specific, spawn specific stuff. I'm not gonna say do this, do that, but like, yeah, look, come up with a plan around. If you're doing this kind of strategy, make sure you have a solid plan and try it, and then at least if you fail, you can analyze what was wrong with the plan, rather than half-assing it or trying to do this like one's mindset stuff, like you say.
It's funny, for a while I thought the only way you could share resources if you both had a market, and then one time you're like, hey, send me resources. I was like, do you have a market? And you're like, dumbass, I don't need a market, just send me the resources. I know you have a market down. I was like, oh, I didn't. So yeah, there is legitimate strategy of, if one of you has extra resources, you don't both need markets. One person can drop the market, send the resources, and it can save the day for sure.
A really good way to come out of that, like, the French guy with the early harass kind of got nailed and they don't have much left. With the ABBA player who's at 120, popcat, 120 vills popcat farming can actually start sending you 1,000 food or taxed food, but 1,000 food every minute or so, get you back in the game. Because even with the harass and carry strategy, you might find that the harasser who kind of got much, they just need 5 minutes. They need to reboom because the game's going to carry on. They're going to have a second wind.
It's amazing how many times I've been attacked pretty badly, and I'm like, "Hey Simon, I think I'm dead. I think this game's over." And you're like, "No," and you'll go raid them, and then you'll come help me, and then you're like, "Here's 300 stone. Get back on. Build a second DC. Get back on your feet," and we win the game because you then buy you're at the point where you can buy me time to get back to scale back in, and you did so much damage with the time I bought by getting my teeth kicked in that I do have that space to do that. So yeah, there's actually some pretty amazing comebacks that can happen in twos. Just from...
make sure your GGs are agreed upon. Don't have a little sulk because you're getting your teeth kicked in, just because you don't know if you weren't watching, maybe your opponent was getting their teeth kicked in. I've actually been called out a few times for being like, "Nah man, this is screwed, it's over, can we please leave?" My teammates like, no, just believe. And a few of those games have won, so I think we've all made that mistake.
Next slide. What civs to play? The easiest thing to say is if you're starting out, if you're new, the easiest thing is a feudal knight civ and a civ that can then do ranged to cover them. That's the easiest, straightforward one. But at a larger theoretical level, every civ has strengths and weaknesses. You want to try to have civs, so much like a unit comp. Spears cover archers, archers cover spears. You want civs that cover each other's weaknesses and in some way can synergize. We talked about at the beginning of the video, but what ways can the civs bonuses or strengths cover each other and support each other? I think the reason you see so many feudal knight civs in that is because that's the most simplest example of that. My knights are very strong. I just need you to cover me with archers and I can carry the rest. But that can apply to a lot of different things within civs.
Yeah, the huge advantage of going knights is it reduces the possibilities that your opponents can choose from.
Yeah, they have to make spears.
It's a problem. You've created a problem. You created a dilemma. It doesn't have a solution. It has trade-offs. Your opponents now have to make sacrifices to solve that. Yeah, to work around the knight problem that you've created for them.
And it's the same thing where if you can do something with a civ synergy, like if you're playing Zushi and HRE, you might be like, well, what's the strength? You can list almost any two civs, and you could generally come up with some way they can help each other. Zushi's really good at pro scouts. They could pro scout deer for HRE. If HRE can get a Burgrave or something, then they can just pump an insane amount of units with deer under Akin. But it's I don't know if that strategy actually be viable. But the point being is that's the fun of twos, is trying to figure out those synergies and trying them out and see if it works or not.
Yeah, and I want you to red team your comp. When you're in the loading screen, you've come up with your own civs. You've probably decided the units that you're going to make. Now think about it from your opponent's perspective. What is the worst thing that they could do to you, right? Mm-hmm. If you've gone knights and archers, what if your opponents go knights and knights, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, two knights.
So every comp has a counter. That's this idea. So how are you going to flex? Are you walking into a bit of a trap? There's units out there that really break the counter system now. Well, the old version of the counter system. There's units out there like heavy spears and units like javelins and stuff where it's it's not the little triangle anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, when I say red team, I mean put yourself in the boots of the opposition and try and think about how you would beat this, right? Maybe it's not a good strategy, but more likely you just need to have that flex ready to go, right? Mm-hmm. If our opponents add more knights, the archer player is the one who's going to add racks and start pumping spears, right? Mm-hmm. You can come up with these strategies in advance, ready to implement if you need them.
Same thing if you're doing an all-in and you're like knights and archers, and someone hits castle. You need to make spears. As
you know that coming exactly, because that is absolutely the correct play. The fast cast sort of pump knights into a to defend an all-in, especially if they have to move across the map.
Yeah, they're not gonna make slow ass men at arms, send them across the map to help their opponent, their teammate who's dying.
When your opponent has one really good play, you need to be preempting that. You need to know that that's what's coming.
I have a question for you. This probably isn't the video for it, but I'm wondering if you're both playing Knight Archer civs, is there an advantage for one team to actually just do Knight Spear instead and then just kill the knights faster? Or do you think the Archer civ wins?
I would like the archers up until a point. I think spears are only really effective in large numbers. With all that posturing and the backwards and forwards, it's quite easy for a little bit of every engagement is expensive for the spear player, right? Every they
get close and they get shot or they get close.
And every disengagement is also expensive, right? So with sufficiently large, massive spears that you can make it just one big engagement, then yes, you're going to have a really good time because you just power through them, right? But I do think that adding a couple of spears in there is just useless. They're going to die. They're not going to stab anyone. You're going to waste putting that rags down.
Yep.
I don't think that. Yeah,
I don't really keep in mind Soimon is the #1 spearman hater. He thinks they're shit. That's all right. And then positioning and communication is everything. We've mentioned it 1,000 times, but I think so many times when we're looking at the losing screen, it can come down to we so many times we said, well, we weren't talking, so we didn't know what was happening, or man, I was forward for some reason and you were over there and I died. It's just like so much of twos because the map is now pretty much a lot bigger than 1v1 maps. Just being caught wrong place, wrong time can swing a game.
Sometimes you just flub, you lose a dozen knights because there's other stuff going on, right? And that that comes straight from ones, but I think even in twos, maybe you were having a conversation when something bad happened and you didn't notice there was knights on your gold. So yeah, forget about the flub. So we don't really. This is a strategy video. This isn't for, how not to flub video. Actually, no. I do. This does going back 5 slides. This is why we pre-decide things, right? You do need airspace to communicate important things, and you do need headspace for focus and for planning. So if you are constantly saying, "Oh, should I make this? Should I make that?" Blah 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 blah. That's how you lose your gold fills.
So to simplify this, the in-game communication should be really focused on, this is what I'm seeing from scouting. Yeah. This is where I see our opponents going. This is the change I'm making. If we pre-decide something, here's the change I'm making, or here's the adjustment I'm making.
Yeah. And if you see, your friend's scout has missed a sheep, it's really important that you ping that, I think 5 times, pause a few seconds, and ping it another 5 times. You don't want to get the ping time out.
Somehow
you make sure that
well, it's amazing really how important. I'll miss stuff that I'm looking at, but I look at the minimap, I see one unit going towards your gold, I'm like, there it is, watch out. And it's you just catch things.
Yeah. Hey, don't get mad about your teammate giving you redundant information, something you've already spotted, something that you already knew. Don't waste space, I think saying, I already know that, you need.
The last thing in communication, which you do to me quite artfully a lot of times, is yes, say the thing you see, but then also just call out if you think they need to handle it. There's so many times where I'm like, hey, these people are coming over here, and you're like, that's a you problem. Because I'm doing this. So I want you to know you're on your own. You gotta
sometimes it's a you problem necessarily, and it's really important that you know that, because you might be in a minimize the loss situation. What's the least bad thing I can come out of this with? And then there's other situations where I'm like, when I'm just telling you that I absolutely think you can handle it. But also I think it's usually the first. It's necessarily, I'm balls deep in somebody else's base. I can't help you. Please die as slowly as you can. If I'm the knight player, that's the way it often goes down, right? We're doing a little bit of a trade. Oh, that's actually maybe a point that we were going to add later on, which is that coming. If you're in the middle of a base trade, don't go home to defend your mate. You need to don't go home. Go
look at the smoke rising from their base, salute, and say, I'm doing it worse to them.
Maybe you can rally new troops or something, but
Yeah.
if you spend 30 seconds, 60 seconds running across the map, you're throwing. You need to focus on those fill kills. And if your teammate's crying because they lost 50 fills, you can pat them on the back and say, "They're their little buddy." Your opponent lost 100.
Yeah, let's go to. So that actually takes us.
These numbers may have been exaggerated for effect.
That goes as the 2v2 tips. Fast castle is less greedy since a player can cover. That's why Soimon was so heavy on don't do anything too fancy in your fast castle, just freaking fast castle. Get there. We need you there as fast as possible. 2, it's valuable to have one person who is the counter causing unit. So the unit that is so powerful it needs a counter. So Knights is one of the most classic examples. There's plenty of units, especially unique units, that require unique counters. So being the person who's making that unit is forcing the counter, and then you need to have the other person who's more of the flex, which is often in the knight scenario, it's the infantry civ. But in plenty of examples, it's what if you know you have a power unit that's going to cause a counter, your ally needs to be the one who's countering that counter already and has it ready to go. So I'm going to lay on that. And the last point, mobility is king. As Soimon said, with the maps being larger, the person who's going cav, which is why it's almost always important to have someone who's making cav, can take such good advantage of bad positioning with either raiding on exposed eco or the bad opponent positioning. The example you gave is great. I think if you're like pushing a base and you see your ally and you see that person's allies like army has walked in to help and they're all infantry, that should send alarm bells. It's like that means their base is unguarded. I'm cav. I'm gonna call up my teammate. Hey, just back up for a second. I'm gonna go raid their base. Go right over, raid, come back, because you force them out of position and you have the mobility to take advantage of that. I did a long rant. Anything else you'd add on the tips side of it?
Yeah, if you want to work on your communication and your positioning, I suggest going for a double mounted comp. So this is like knights plus a mounted archer. This could be Abbasid and Ayubid pumping camels. This could be horse archers or Onimusha. It's bang for buck. Obviously, you're going to lose to infantry fights, but if you move and shoot and scoot, and you take little 2v1s where you can, and you clean up loose units here and there, and you raid their eco and then run away. And if they do push you, at least you have defender's advantage. I think that's a really good opportunity to talk to your teammate about where you are, where they are, where the opponent is, and to micro your units and have some fun, because I think that's a really enjoyable strat. So give it a shot. If that game carries on, please switch to infantry at some point.
Especially as the walls start to come up and your horse archers just running into walls and towers and keeps.
Yeah, please don't tell me about your 60-minute game where you made nothing but knights and horse archers. But yeah, I think that's actually a really great way to practice that part of the game. At least maybe you have to switch out of it at some point.
Yeah. Is there anything to take from this? Get your ping button ready. Get your communication on point, and practice that. Like the thing I always, when I'm coaching people, I suggest I almost always need to tell them, you need to be more aggressive. People actually are really bad at being aggressive at almost every level, because we overassume our enemy's strength, so we're less likely to attack, when oftentimes you have a lot of examples to attack. So it's the same thing where the best way to improve the skill is to kind of push the limits of it. Really try to call out, scout, see what your opponent's doing, and see if you can take advantage of that. If they're over there, can we kind of do a quick dive on their base and get out? If it didn't work, it's like, well, now we know. That's not quite the line we can hit. So just try those things out, communicate, review at the end of the games, and because those moments where you can catch someone just out of the right spot, use your mobility to do something about it, and then follow up with a good counter, is what twos is all about, baby.
Yeah, couldn't say it better myself.
All right, man. Well, let's go play some twos.
I'm excited.
All right, thanks.
Waiting for the whole video.
Thanks everyone for watching. Hope you enjoyed it, and hopefully we'll have some more twos content down the line. Soimon, thank you for joining with me, and
thanks for having me,
and just yapping it up.
That's my forte.
All right.